So, hello, good morning, and welcome everyone to the Yucatan release webinar. This is our release webinar, our quarterly release webinar for HAPI 6.8.0 and Smile CDR 2023.08.R01. And we are, of course, codenaming this Yucatan. And of course, I just realized I did not update the date at the slide in the corner of the slide. So, if anyone's wondering if it's February, no, it is not February. Sigh. Oh, well, there we go. So, as always, we are going to be presenting updates. We're going to talk today about what is new in HAPI, what is new in Smile CDR, what is new in our clinical reasoning product families, and a little bit about what we're going to be working over the next while. So there we go. Let's dive into it. This is our 25th named release, and I am going to admit that I was wondering if that was right, and I started counting this morning, and I counted all the way to Y through all of our releases before realizing that there are 26 letters in the alphabet, and Y is the second last one, so I really didn't need to count to figure that out. Then I got myself some caffeine, so hopefully I can be a little bit more organized this morning. That was a fun, humbling start to the day. Oh well. Oftentimes, so we our awesome team here at Smile often put together a slide with some neat information about whatever code name we've given our release. We are of course talking about Yucatan this time. I always find I learn something from these slides, and I'll say this is actually an exception because I know a decent amount about Yucatan. It so happens I've got a bunch of family down in that part of the world, so I have spent a lot of time in Yucatan. I was kind of excited when it got picked for the release code name this time around. If you're not familiar, Yucatan is the little pointy bit down at the bottom of Mexico. If you've ever been to Cancun, Yucatan is the state immediately to the left of Quintana Roo, where Cancun is located. It's a really, really neat place. We don't even entirely have it on here, but fun facts I can give you about Cancun, about Yucatan. It's a really interesting geographic formation. It's all sort of on limestone, and the entire water table is below the surface. So they don't have any natural rivers or lakes anywhere because all the water flows beneath the surface of the ground. But they do have these awesome things called cenotes that are, you can see a picture of one just in the middle of the screen on the right. They're these awesome sort of giant holes that fall down into the ground, and oftentimes you can swim in them, and it is a really, really neat experience to do that. So if you ever had a chance to do that, if you ever haven't had a chance to do that, I would recommend doing it. And I certainly got to point out some of the local fauna down there. It is one of the native homes of an animal called the coati. That's the picture we got on the left. And coati, they're a little bit like raccoons, our lovely HAPI mascot. They're every bit as cute. They got these big, long, stripy tails that float up in the air as they walk around. Super, super cute animals. So there we go. And one thing I didn't know, that I guess I did learn something from this slide. If you Google Chicxulub, you'll get quite a funny surprise. So I'd recommend doing that. Anyhow, as always, we've got a playlist this time around. This is put together by all of the people who bring you Smile CDR and all of our various products. Interesting collection of songs. I'd recommend checking it out. I will put this slide up again later if you want to have a look at it. We'll always share these playlists. Lots of interesting contributions. Everybody on the team contributed one song, or at least everyone who wanted to contribute a song did. So there we go. So let's talk about what's new in Smile CDR this time around. First off, let's talk about a documentation change that we've made. We have now added a page to our documentation, and this went live literally just yesterday. So it squeaked in just in time for the release and time for our webinar. The page is called Development Forecast. And what we're going to be doing on this page is trying to sort of keep it up to date with what are our short-term plans for development that have not yet made it into the product. And by short-term, I basically mean what are we going to be working on over the next quarter. Often at the tail end of these webinars, I'll talk a little bit about the high-level stuff we're going to be working on, but of course, we don't have time to give that much detail. So we're going to try and keep this page up to date with a little bit more detailed information. Certainly not every last thing we're working on is going to be on here, and sometimes we've got much bigger projects that are too big to go on this page, but certainly we'll try and use this page to give an idea of what are the features that are coming in the next quarter. And if you want to check that out, there is a fair bit of detail on there already, so lots of interesting notes about what's coming. I'd recommend checking that out. Let's dive into features that are going on. So first off, our MDM product, we continue to work on expanding MDM. I've spoken before about what a project we call MDM 2.0, or 2.0, which is endeavoring to add a whole bunch of new functionality to all of the awesome existing MDM capabilities in the product family. Among things that have gone in recently, we have added the ability to do configurable nickname matching, which means that you can define custom lists of nicknames, and those will get factored into name calculation scores and all that good stuff. We've also added this, what we're calling configurable exclusion rules, and these can be used to add basically criteria for ignoring specific resources if you don't want them to factor into automatic linking by the MDM product. Examples of that, of course, would include things like if you've got newborns and they get called baby girl and baby boy until they actually get named. You naturally don't want to create links between all of the various patient resources named baby girl and baby boy. So you could choose to exclude that criteria from your matching. Test identifiers and that type of thing is another great example, and there's plenty more as well. So this would be certainly very useful if you're trying to roll out MDM in any kind of real world scenarios. Next up, in the early days of Smile CDR, we developed our own metrics and monitoring capabilities entirely internal to the product. And if you've spent any time in our web admin console, you'll probably be familiar, pardon me, with all of the graphs that show up on the runtime portion of that. One of the challenges we've had over the years is we had developed our own completely internal metrics and monitoring recording, and it was limited in some ways. It didn't pair entirely well with external monitoring tools, and most importantly, it had some trouble scaling up when people were doing really big clusters. Obviously, these days, people are scaling Smile to really big scales in terms of amounts of data, and we've done tons of work to make sure that the FHIR repository itself can hold up to these monster deployments. But another part of Smile, our metrics calculations, was struggling under these giant loads. So what we've started doing is we're in the middle of a transition away from using our own internal tooling to using just a standardized metrics and monitoring stack based on Prometheus and Grafana. A bunch of work has gone in the last quarter. We've got some really interesting documentation pages that show you how to get that all set up. We've also now added a capability for you to automatically export JSON config files right from the web admin console that can be imported into Grafana. So if you want to start building Grafana-based dashboards for monitoring Smile CDR, all of that is pretty easy these days. And if you've never played with Prometheus, I have to say I absolutely love it. These are both open source tools, incidentally, Prometheus and Grafana. If you're not familiar with them, they're excellent products. Highly worth checking out, and they do these days play very well with Smile. So certainly more to come with that. We haven't yet retired the existing metrics capabilities, so this is just a new option, but in the coming while, I suspect this is going to completely replace what we've got today. So I think that's going to be good for overall scalability and ease of management of the product. The next feature is one that I'm really excited personally to share with you, just because I think this is going to be really interesting to see how this develops. This is an experimental feature. I will say that first and foremost. Hopefully over time, we'll graduate this up our own feature maturity model, but it is certainly experimental today. We are proud to be introducing a new query language that is baked right into HAPI and Smile CDR called HFQL, or HAPI Query Language. What this is a SQL-based syntax that allows you to do queries of your FHIR repository and basically export the data in a columnar format. Obviously, these days, using SQL against FHIR repositories is a fairly popular thing. Lots of people are talking about various approaches to this. Lots of people are talking about analytics use cases and data extraction use cases and things like that. What we've done is we have defined this custom syntax. It is largely based on SQL. It's pretty similar to SQL. It does have some differences, obviously. FHIR being a document format and not a columnar format means you need to sort of adapt it a little bit. So what we've done is we've married FHIR path expressions, and you can see an example on the screen there of a few basic FHIR path expressions being used to specify column definitions. And this allows you to search across FHIR resources and pull data down. We've also added some basic sort of count functions, some aggregation functions, and we've got lots more plans to continue to beef this up once we get some real world experience with it. Also worth mentioning, and I think something that makes this really particularly exciting in the world of HAPI and Smile is that we have developed a custom JDBC driver for all of this. So if you've got your favorite database tool, and that might be sort of something like dbeaver, for browsing databases. It could even be a reporting tool, something like JasperSoft or Crystal Reports or any of those types of tools. The JDBC driver can be imported right into your existing tools, and you can then use all the power of a SQL-based JDBC connection into your existing tools, talking right to your FHIR repository. There are lots of caveats to this, lots of limitations to this today. These are all things that we plan on continuing to work on. Really, at this point, we would love to get some real-world feedback. So if you want to take this for a spin, we would love it. Try out the JDBC driver. There are instructions in our documentation on where to get it. We have a link to it from GitHub. You can also try it out from a web console. So if you go to hapi.phir.org, we do absolutely have a page there that will allow you to execute these queries in a browser. So nice and easy way of trying it out. We would love to hear your feedback about what works, what doesn't work, what do you like about the syntax, what do you not like about the syntax, and where do you want to go with it. There's also a little bit of information about our roadmap in the documentation pages for HFQL. So let us know what you think. Next up, we continue to roll out Megascale. Megascale, of course, is an architecture in Smile CDR that allows you to scale just massively, allows you to create FHIR repositories that scale well beyond the 100 terabyte limit that many physical databases have by smearing data across multiple physical databases. Really interesting thing, and we've now got a few customers who are beginning production rollouts of this technology. Which means that we're getting lots of great feedback. We've been rolling in a few minor bug fixes. There's actually no significant bug fixes in this release, just because at this point we've had enough feedback that we're pretty confident in it. We did, of course, migrate it up to the trial status in our maturity model in our previous release. We have just added the ability for use different credentials per tenant per partition rather within a single physical database, which is kind of an interesting little addition because it allows you to turn on what Postgres calls row-level security. So if you're using Megascale for strict multi-tenancy, you can now use Postgres to further enforce the tenant-based separation. So that's kind of an interesting change that we've added to Megascale. Next up, in the world of bulk export, we've made a security change to bulk export. This is basically to allow people to secure their bulk export enabled FHIR servers a little bit easier. By default, and this can be turned off through configuration, but by default in Smile CDR, we will now restrict downloads of any bulk export files to the same user who initiated the export. Previously, of course, you'd have to set up your own rules around bulk export and potentially rely on the long URLs that we created and things like that. These days, that is now completely locked down to just the same user. You can, of course, turn that off. You could set up different security rules if you want, but this just feels like a good, sensible default for us to pick. So that is what we have selected. If you're a HAPI FHIR user, we have also included a set of new interceptors that you can use to implement similar restrictions. We, of course, don't have user management in HAPI FHIR, so we can't implement this completely end to end. But if this is a rule that you'd like on your bulk export, this is definitely a thing you can do now. In the world of HL7 v2 processing, we continue to add support for new transactions there. Two transactions have been added to this release. Those are A39, which is the merge person ID, and A40, which is the merge patients transactions. These are, of course, super useful if you are processing EHR data, just because EHRs will send these transactions out when they're merging records. Previously, you had to rely on manual workflows. You can now do this in a fairly automated way through processing those messages. So hopefully that will be useful to people who are processing V2 data. We've had lots of people developing Java-based interceptors against Smile CDR. So we've added a number of new point cuts. Those include updates and creates to smart client definitions, a new point cut on our HL7 v2 to FHIR conversion, which allows you to do post-processing in Java. Previously, that was only possible in JavaScript. And a whole bunch of new point cuts to the FHIR gateway that allow for more advanced routing operations to be done. So quite a bit of interesting capabilities have been added to the point cut architecture within Smile CDR for the Java developers out there. R5 subscriptions. I spoke fairly extensively last time around about R5 subscriptions. We've had some good feedback so far. We continue to enhance the way that R5 subscriptions work. So among other things that have been, among different things that have been added, we have added a new capability called Subscription Topic Dispatcher. What this allows you to do is programmatically define your topic definitions. I don't want to get entirely into how subscription topics work this time because we talked about that during the last release webinar a fair bit. But naturally, if you've got topics which are not perhaps based entirely on search criteria, they're based on business functions or something like that, the subscription topic dispatcher allows you to do this programmatically, which will be pretty neat. We've also implemented the FHIR subscriptions R5 backport implementation guide, which allows you to use some of this functionality through extensions in R4 land, which is kind of neat if you want to start taking advantage of this stuff, but you have an R4 server. We've also finally added support for what we call subscription topic filters. And these basically allow you to define sort of code-based additional filter criteria on your subscription topics. So effectively what we're doing here is starting to really honor the spirit of subscription topics, which are that these topics may well be based on data criteria that is external to the FHIR server, things like business logic and business actions that happen outside in the real world. So all of this is recognizing those facts, and subscriptions just continue to get more powerful as the days go by. We have now added support for a little IG that I am personally very excited about. This IG comes from IHE, and it's called the Basic Audit Pattern. I've hinted at this a few times, and I think I've spoken at FHIR Connectathons about it a few times, but this is now finally landed in our code branches and has made the actual release at this point. What we've done is we've added a new interceptor called the BALP Audit Capture Interceptor, or for short, I've been calling it the BALP Audit Capture Interceptor. Kind of love that name. What this does is it allows you to generate BALP compliant audit event records that are fully compliant with the IHE IG. And you can decide where those records are going to go. As a part of demonstrating this capabilities, and I'm kind of excited about this, I think it's a neat little demonstration. We have added BALP compliant audit logging to our public HAPI FHIR test server. So every action, every search, every update, every read, everything that you do on the public servers now generates an audit event. And in order to generate a nice architecture, a nice demonstration architecture, we're routing all of those audit events over to a new FHIR repository that's at /base audit on our public server. So if you want to have a look at the audit trail for the public server, head over to the link on your screen and you can check out all of the actions there. If you're worried about the audit trail being a privacy leak, we do anonymize the IP addresses, so we're not giving away the IP addresses of everyone who's visiting the server, but they are otherwise fairly compliant. Obviously, the public HAPI server is an anonymous server in the first place. So these audit events don't actually have usernames attached to them. We've gone with the user agent from the client as sort of a surrogate for that, because this, of course, is just a non-production demonstration. But it is production ready, so you can certainly start rolling this capability out in production if that's a thing you want to do. A couple of miscellaneous enhancements we've made. So this first one is long requested, and I think very exciting to anyone who's writing JavaScript against our APIs. Client JavaScript can now be broken into discrete files, and we now support import statements, which allow you to break your JavaScript up into multiple modules, reuse code as necessary, all those kinds of things. So if you're writing JavaScript, for interceptors or message mapping logic or anything like that, you will probably love this. We've had very positive feedback from the people who've been testing it out so far. One other thing that we've done is we've stabilized and enabled in Smile CDR what we call normalized unit searching. If you're not familiar with this feature, which has been around in a sort of an experimental status in HAPI FHIR for a good while now, this allows what we do with normalized unit searching is any quantities, any measurements which are measured in kilograms or pounds or centimeters or anything. We will now store a duplicate copy of that measurement using a UCOM-based normalized measurement. So, for example, if you store a weight assessment and you store it in pounds, we will store your original pounds value, but we will also internally in the database store a normalized kilograms version of that. Actually, I think it's normalized to grams version of that. And then if you try and do a search using whatever units you choose, like you want to look for do a search in pounds or in grams or in kilograms, whatever units you use, we will convert that internally and then search against the normalized copy. So this allows you to be a little bit independent of the units of measure that are being used. This is dependent on measurements being codified using UCOM in the first place, but assuming you're doing that, this can be super useful. So very excited to see that rolling out. A couple of other little things that have gone in. We now support cascaded deletes for the $delete expunge operation. This is an operation that both deletes resources and physically expunges them from the database, and does so quite efficiently, which is useful if you've got big, large-scale delete use cases. We now support cascades in there as well. Our partition management operations will now auto-assign IDs if necessary. Previously, you had to assign the IDs manually. Now they can be done automatically if that's what you want. And finally, we've got configuration that allows you to restrict subscriptions to only supporting memory-backed subscriptions. Subscriptions, if you're not familiar with what that means, can be either database-backed or memory-backed, where memory-backed is much more performant, but a little bit more limited in what it can do. And if you want to avoid the performance penalties and be sure you're avoiding the performance penalties of database-backed subscriptions, then setting this flag would be a useful thing to do. A couple of enhancements that have gone into HAPI-FHIR. We now support encoding fragments through the parser. What that means is you can now pass into the parser serializer not only a full resource, but you could pass in a data type or a block or any part of a resource, and we will now encode that fragment. Thanks to Brian Postlethwaite, who suggested this ages ago and has been bugging me for years for us to do it, and we finally did. So you're welcome, Brian. We now support basically calling FHIR operations that return non-FHIR responses. We have seen a few examples of people doing exactly that. And I'll tell you, actually, the driver that finally got us to do this, we use FHIR communications internally in our JDBC driver for that HFQL thing I was talking about before. But we use FHIR over the wire. We're just using the FHIR operations framework as a communication mechanism. So this is now a thing that you can do with this client. We now also, if you're using FHIRPath internally, like if you're programmatically using FHIRPath, we now support pre-compiling FHIRPath expressions and reusing the pre-compiled FHIRPath expressions, which is a significant performance increase. And I do mean significant. This isn't like a 10%. This is often 50 or more % faster if you are evaluating the same FHIRPath expression over and over. Basically, you've got one FHIRPath and you're going to evaluate it against thousands of resources, you will often see a very significant speed up, because as it turns out, parsing and compiling the FHIRPath expression is often upwards of 50% of the time, and actually executing that expression is the smaller of those two actions. So pre-compiling can be a giant benefit. This is only useful if you're programmatically evaluating FHIRPath, but naturally, all of the places where HAPI-FHIR itself evaluates FHIRPath have been modified to use this as well. So we've seen a bunch of other speed ups throughout the library as well. The final thing I will say about HAPI-FHIR today is a change that I'm both a little bit excited and I also just don't like that we have to do, but it is a thing that we have to do. So I will start by saying thank you to everyone who contributed to the 2023 community survey. We put out a survey about 2 months ago, and a number of people submitted responses to it. We really appreciate the feedback. The big topic this year is an API change that has been kind of forced on us. If you're not familiar with the Java EE servlet specifications, a giant change was pushed through, which started, I think, about 2 years ago. It might be a little bit more than that, where Oracle formally donated the Java Enterprise Edition code bases to the Eclipse Foundation. And one of the conditions of that donation was that they change the package namespaces that get used. So all of this has been renamed from javax.servlet to jakarta.servlet and javax.transaction to jakarta.transaction. This is a massive breaking change that has been thrust our way, and every library out there, including HAPI-FHIR, has had to make a very difficult decision about whether they make this change. Because if you make this change, You are breaking things for a bunch of users. You're forcing them to rewrite code. We also do know that there are people who are going to be alienated by this code that won't be able to do these updates. However, we have heard loud and clear from community feedback that if we don't make this change, there is a much larger group of people that will be unable to continue using the framework. So we have decided to make this change. We will be updating to the Jakarta namespace in our upcoming November release in 3 months' time. So if you're waiting on this because you desperately want to upgrade to Spring Boot 6 or Spring Framework 6 or any of the other frameworks that have moved, don't worry, you will be able to do that as of our November release. I'm hoping we will start to have pre-development snapshots that reflect this change pretty quickly. So there we go. I do have a link. I know it's a big link, and we will share this link in other times. We've also posted it a few times on our mailing list. There are a bunch of other changes that we're planning, but they're farther out, and none of them are set in stone like this one is. So I'm not going to talk about them today, but we do have some other changes coming. So watch for future webinars. We'll talk about a few other API changes that are coming to HAPI that will hopefully be popular as we go. So that's it for that. Let's switch gears quickly to talk about our clinical reasoning product family. I'm pretty excited to talk about this stuff as well. First off, let's talk about our DQM solution. So what is this all about? So CMS, the CMS department have made it very clear that their Meaningful Measures 2 initiative, which is often called MM2, they want to build on their commitment to using FHIR to bring benefits to their quality measure reporting framework. MM2 has a couple of big goals. They are looking to streamline measures across all the federal programs that use it. They're looking to fully transform and convert over to using fully digital measures. And they're looking to, most importantly, probably, they're looking to take advantage of these quality measures to improve patient outcomes. They have not yet specified an enforcement date for the MM2 stuff, but it is widely expected to be 2025. So what are we doing? We are building a solution, the digital quality measures solution that fully implements reporting for MM2 measurements. In addition to sort of being compliant with the upcoming mandates, we see a number of business benefits to doing this. Certainly more accurate reporting, instant API-enabled submissions, and all of that good stuff, working at large scale. We just think this is awesome. So we have spent the last many months actually working on this product. We're very excited to announce it today. So there we go. Moving on to how this thing works. Once your data is in your repository, sitting inside Smile CDR, we have an end-to-end process that will effectively very quickly submit these quality reports into CMS. What used to be sort of a day, take days, sometimes even weeks, is now done in minutes. This should bring just massive speed ups to all of this, and we have spent a ton of time beefing up the performance in terms of how this all works. So there we go. What else is there to say about all of this? As I mentioned before, this thing is super fast. We are able to evaluate 1 million patients in under an hour per measure, which is, we're dealing with entire massive patient charts. And we can evaluate, these huge sort of measures in under an hour for this giant deluge of patients. So very, very exciting stuff. The benchmark that we're working on these days is 50,000 patients get evaluated for a full 6-measure set in just under 5 minutes. So this is, I think, a very, very good benchmark. We've also developed this implementation to be super, super flexible. So if you want to run in real-time mode, you can do that. If you want to run in population mode, you can do that. And either way, you will get awesome, very high-quality metrics evaluated against your data sets completely on the spot. So very exciting stuff there. We do see ourselves as the experts in this stuff. We love it. We are among the most experienced in the world at authoring FHIR and CQL content. We continue to build on that. We continue to be trusted by federal agencies, universities, and great big tech companies. We've got a few examples of that. So if you would like to get started at using our DQM expertise, do let us know. We would love to hear from you. I will say finally on this part of it, we have now made available our 3.0.0 pre-release of the clinical reasoning suite. More importantly, we continue to migrate all of our code base for clinical reasoning and CQL execution directly into HAPI-FHIR. We're sort of consolidating code bases these days. I love this metric. As programmers know, anytime you get to delete code, that's always a good thing because that means less code to maintain. We have made over 1.5 million code line deletions as we consolidate and harmonize the two code bases. So that obviously is very exciting. One final thing I'll say is that indexing of our definition resources in order to perform better lookups is about 2 times faster these days as well. So lots of good stuff there. A little bit about what's coming in the next while. So I am running out of time. I wasn't expecting this to take this long, actually. And it's funny, I was thinking as we started this is a fairly light month, light quarter, actually, in terms of announcements. So it's fun that I've run out of time, but oh well. We are hard at work with a bunch of multi-quarter projects. And for that reason, we have fewer sort of big ticket things to announce this quarter. And that's mostly because we've got a bunch of stuff that is coming in the next quarter. So our November release, actually, we've got a bunch of big, exciting announceables. Among them, we will be introducing our prior authorization suite. So our first 0.1 release comes in November. We're on track to deliver that. We're very excited about that. The CDA exchange module, which can be used to accept and convert to FHIR CDA documents, will hit 2.0. And this is a ground-up rewrite we're very excited for. We're also deep in the weeds of building an integration layer based on Apache Camel for Smile CDR. So if you're a Smile user, there is really exciting stuff coming about sort of stitching together integration patterns within the product. I'm going to talk about that at length, I'm sure, in one quarter, so I won't talk about it anymore, but lots of good stuff there. We are also continuing to refine and improve support for Megascale and the international patient summary platforms based on the real world experience that we're starting to hear back. And of course, actually, I don't know why I say question mark there. I just gave you the timeline for the Servlet API. So all of the HAPI-FHIR stuff is coming for November as well. If you're going to be at Civitas, I think that's next week, actually, we would love to talk to you. We've got a team going down to Civitas. That's just outside DC, if I'm not mistaken. Oh yeah, it is National Harbor, Maryland. I've been there before. So we will be there. We're also at the eSolutions Exchange Conference, which is shortly after that. So lots of stuff coming in August, obviously. Smile team will be all over the place. We would love to talk to you. Finally, as always, we've got a release playlist. This is the webinar for it. If you're a part of the HAPI-FHIR community, we would love to hear from you on our mailing list. You can also find links to the document with our upcoming changes there, so that's exciting. We do continue to support our Smile CDR, well, let's say Twitter account. I guess it's not called that anymore. And of course, I've moved my own self off of Twitter and onto Mastodon because I like that platform better. So you can find me on Hackaderm. And I think that's all I can say. So with that said, I would love to welcome Megan Pete back to the stage. Megan, of course, is our UX designer extraordinaire. Hello, Megan.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on. This is going to be our Q&A session. It's not just where to find James. So if you want to add any questions to the chat, I will read them out. We've already got one in, which is really exciting. We don't have to start with my questions, though. There's time. I'm looking forward to them. The first question is, which EMR vendor did Smile partner with for their first customer implementation of prior auth?
Ooh, there we go. I'm going to be honest. I don't know that I can answer that. I do have an answer. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say it. So sadly, I'm going to have to be a little bit evasive about that. I will tell you, though, if you would like to find out the information about that, a great thing to do would be to attend the upcoming HL7 Connectathon. The next HL7 Connectathon is in early September. It's in Phoenix, Arizona. We do have a team who are headed down from our prior auth team. They will be doing real-world testing, I believe, with several partners and several EHR vendors. So if you'd like to see all this stuff happening for real, we'd love to have you there. I will say we have definitely tested with at least one or two of the really big names, the obvious ones. I think that's all I can say here. I'll tell you what, I'm going to take this one away, and I will find out what I'm allowed to say for our next release webinar in November. And we, of course, are going to have a whole bunch of information more about prior auth, including who we've tested with and all that good stuff. I am sorry, I rarely give evasive answers, I like to think, for this webinar. I just don't know what I'm allowed to say right now.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I know they were looking at a lot of different vendors back when I had more knowledge of prior auth, but I know it's still a hot topic. So I'm also excited to learn more. Anyone else please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm going to sneak in my question. I don't attend many Connectathons, so I've missed your talk about basic audit log patterns, or BALP. I'm just trying to puzzle out the acronyms in my head. That's always a game with these talks for me. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about it. Give me like the Coles Notes version of why it's a neat IG.
Yeah, very happy to. So BALP, I mean, first off, I love it because the name is just kind of fun to say. I have no idea if the actual team want to call it that way. Hopefully they're not cringing that I keep calling it BALP, but I think it's a neat name. Um, one of so writing FHIR infrastructure, and lots of people are writing FHIR infrastructure. There are great IGs out there that specify how to solve lots of real world problems. If you are trying to, I mean, we're implementing a bunch of IGs for prior auth as an example, and there's great IGs written and being written that cover those problems. There's all kinds of reporting IGs and use cases for various clinical scenarios and all that good stuff. But oftentimes, what often gets ignored is the sort of, the non-functional requirements, things like scalability, performance, those characteristics, and security is a big one that's really important. We do, of course, have the Smart on FHIR specification, which gives us some tools that we can use for authorization and authentication. But audit, of course, is another big part of your security infrastructure. And up until now, there really hasn't been a whole lot of standardized guidance on how you would do auditing against a FHIR server. Which doesn't mean you couldn't do auditing, of course. FHIR has had the audit event resource for a long time. It just meant that you were kind of left to your own devices to write your audit trail. And there wasn't really a whole lot of hope that if you had two different systems that were generating audit event resources, that those events would look terribly similar to each other, just because we didn't have good solid guidance. IHE have endeavored to solve that problem. And IHE, of course, have a long history of concerning themselves with audit. They are the authors of the ATNA specification, which has been around as an audit specification for a long time. If you're not familiar with ATNA, it's not a FHIR spec. It's certainly long predates FHIR actually, and has loads and loads of production use. I would speculate it's probably one of the most implemented IAG implementation guides actually, and a very good quality one as well. But for people working in FHIR, we haven't had something similar up until now. And BALP, of course, is ATNA effectively, or at least a portion of the ATNA infrastructure, extended to FHIR. So just a really nice implementation guide for that. There's not really, I mean, not a whole lot else to say about it. That's the problem it aims to solve, is auditing, which is kind of one of those, not terribly sexy problems, but critical if you want to store securely and work with securely health data. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be fun to see what people think of it. And the fact that we've got this little demonstrator up on our public testing server, I think is an additional bonus there. So hopefully people will find that kind of fun. Incidentally, you could marry that with the HFQL stuff that I announced. I've actually had some fun personally using SQL to query our audit trail and figure out patterns in the audit events that we see on the public server. So that is a thing you can do. I would love if people come up with neat queries for doing that kind of thing. Maybe that would be a fun thing to share in the mailing list or on Zulip or something like that. So that's all I have to say about that.
That's cool. I feel like every project I'm on, we'll get a certain point into it, and then we'll go, but what about auditing? Like that's always a big spot that you want to ignore, but it's always very important. I do see more questions coming in the chat. I'm going to skip ahead to this most recent question because I think it's relevant in case you want to elaborate more. You just gave an example of it. For the HFQL/SQL driver feature, which is experimental, when it's fully baked, what will it enable that we can't do today? So I think that's more future for HFQL.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's say this. The idea is that it is purely about extracting data from a FHIR repository. So one way to look at it is it doesn't enable anything you can't do today, because of course you can always get data out of a FHIR repository using the existing REST API. But what it does allow you to do is express a whole bunch of queries in a way that you get your data out in sort of a nice columnar format. So I guess there's two things I'll talk about there. I mean, first off, the ability to extract data into CSV or tab-based data so that you can import it into Excel and work with it there and generate pivot tables and all that good stuff. I mean, that alone I think is super useful. A simple example is, let's say I've got a whole bunch of height and weight assessments and various vital sign assessments stored as observation resources in my in my database. A thing that I might want to do is develop pivot tables in Excel. I mean, Excel is, people love it and people hate it, but you can't argue that it's a super, super powerful tool. And lots of people know how to do very, very fancy things with Excel. Up until now, if you wanted to get your data out of the FHIR repository and into Excel, like you were writing a bunch of custom scripts, right? You'd have to script something up that downloaded, use the REST API to download the resources, pulled the right values out of your JSON, put them out, all that good stuff. This can now be sort of effectively done as a simple SQL query. And I mean, I've tried that workflow myself. I've written SQL queries. I've brought in the JDBC driver into dbeaver. I've pulled down just a bunch of data from the public HAPI FHIR server, and ultimately I've exported that into Excel to try playing with it, and it's worked. I think it's kind of neat. The other thing that we have added that is perhaps even harder to do necessarily through the REST APIs is things like count and aggregation queries. I didn't entirely talk about what that was in the one slide I presented on this, but let's give a simple example. And I'm hoping people will come up with better examples than mine, because all of my examples have just been little test things as I sort of play with it myself and other people play with it. But I bet there's better use cases. But like a simple thing that I was able to do as I was playing with this is craft a count and group query where I looked for all the patients named Simpson in the database and then aggregated it on the last name and counted each of the first names that appeared there. And that was kind of a fun way of figuring out how many of the different Simpsons characters had people used as test data in the server. And like that query, I think we've actually got it in the documentation because I thought it was a neat one and popped it up into there. Obviously that's not a real world problem people want to solve because you probably don't have Simpsons characters in your actual production data. And I can't imagine you're actually trying to count how many people have different first names, but maybe you are. And probably there's something that looks like that is actually a real world problem. Who knows? So there's two examples. They're both fairly contrived, but this is kind of the point. I mean, we're putting this out, and I'm hoping that people will come up with real-world problems they can solve with this technology and tell us about them, so that we'll get some ideas. And for that matter, I hope that people will start telling us about what we should continue to add to the syntax. I will say a big notable thing that's missing from the syntax currently is joins. You cannot join across resource types today, so your queries have to be limited to a single resource type. That doesn't mean we don't plan on implementing them. We're just sort of trying to figure out what it looks like. And frankly, hearing some use cases that would benefit from joins would be really useful because that would actually give us a target to try and hit. So community members, over to you. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, that's really neat. I think maybe it could also tie into your example of like babies being named baby boy or baby girl and stuff like that as well. We got so many more in the chat though. I'm gonna move on, as much as we've had many family discussions about the pitfalls and glory of Excel at the dinner table at my house. We've got a question. I'm just going to go back to some of the old ones. Just a really quick one. Will the November version support JDK 17 and Hibernate Search 6.2?
Ooh, that's a fun question. So I will say we already support JDK 17. In fact, we recommend. In fact, I will strengthen that. I'm going to say we highly recommend using JDK 17 today. We build HAPI FHIR against JDK 11. We build Smile CDR against JDK 11. We actually internally write our unit tests for both of those platforms on JDK 17 already. So you need JDK 17 to build HAPI FHIR today. We do not currently have plans to make the minimum JDK for HAPI FHIR be JDK 17. We are deliberately holding that back. And I will tell you honestly, the main drivers for that are, we do know there are users out there who are unable to upgrade to 17. There's also the matter of Android, which Android support today, especially on somewhat older devices, is not great for JDK 17. That is changing rapidly. So I don't think this is a permanent thing, but for now we are holding the line at our minimum JDK being 11, which just means we're not using any 17 features in the framework. I will say our testing, and I've personally, and I know other people at Smile have as well, I have personally done benchmarks comparing HAPI FHIR and Smile CDR performance on JDK 11 with exact same specs, exact same tests on 17, and the results were surprisingly good. 17 oftentimes was 10 to 20% faster. And this is, mostly because the garbage collector is that much better in JDK 17, which means if you're really cramming a million queries a second through the thing, you will get better performance. So, short version is it's definitely supported today. It's actually super recommended you use JDK 17, but we are not going to be upgrading our minimum in November.
Great, thank you. So I guess the answer is yes, we've already done it. So you can look forward to whenever you want to go to 17, enjoying that. We've got a question from Daniel, which is fun. It's asking, what are some exciting things you foresee coming from the integration of FHIR and prior auth processes working to enhance the delivery of value-based care, or CDS, and so on?
Ooh, this is all these prior auth problems coming to me. That's I mean, I will start by saying I am not the prior auth expert. I'm kind of wishing we had an actual prior auth expert on the call. And I suppose, given that we're announcing the product in November, we'll probably will have someone who can answer these questions better than I am. I mean, the obvious thing though is that the entire process, like anyone who's ever had to do a prior authorization knows that it is a long process and a bit of a painful process. I can say personally, like as a Canadian, I live in Canada, so I do fewer prior authorizations than perhaps our friends in the United States do. But that doesn't mean we don't do them up here. I have had to do a prior auth. I actually had to do one not too long ago, and it is a very, very painful process. My personal having to do prior auth, I had to do one for a medicine I was prescribed. It involved I literally had to find a fax machine myself, because I had to go and talk to a doctor and get them to fill out a form and then fax that to my insurance provider, which I did not enjoy that process at all. So I can completely understand why having this thing be electronic would be a life-changing experience. And of course, if you have to do these things regularly, all the more so. That's a giant a giant savings, and clearly a giant improvement in delay of care, which is important to everyone. So I don't know. I mean, I think in a lot of ways this is going to be transformative for lots of people, but I think I'll leave it there because I bet we'll have a lot more to say at our next webinar.
Yeah, that's exciting. I know it's just wildly expensive, just in the term of sheer amount of man hours, both from the patients or the members to the support staff on both sides, both the payer side and the clinician side. And I also know the deep feelings of just doing prior auth in Canada. It's not even as common as in the States. And it's so easy to miss a step and then it just fizzle out and die. And either you have to start again or investigate where that step is gone. So having that all in one kind of system is going to be hopefully really helpful. I'm looking forward to it for our American friends. Hoping it eventually trickles back up to Canada to make my life easier too.
I wonder if we'll ever do away with the fax-based prior auth here in Canada. I feel like the answer is probably no, but anyone out in Canada, we'd love to help you.
Yeah. We've got another question coming in from Jens asking if there's any plans to add an async version of the HAPI FHIR client.
Oh, that's a fun question. Yeah, and so, I mean, async is growing in popularity. If people are unfamiliar, I mean, FHIR, there are a few things today which take advantage of what's called the async, I forget what the other word is in it, but the FHIR spec does have an async operation mode. It's mostly used today for things like kicking off bulk export jobs. It allows you to say, I would like to initiate this bulk export job. In that case, it has to be async, and the system will tell you, it'll give you a little polling location where you can find out if the job is done and all of that good stuff. Our server supports that today, but the client really doesn't. It sort of gives you a little bit of basic tools. You can invoke the operation and see what it said, but there's no tooling beyond that. And we really don't make it easy for you to deal with asynchronous operations through the HAPI FHIR client. This is all the more important because asynchronous operation in FHIR servers isn't just for things like bulk export. There is actually a defined mechanism where you can submit regular, FHIR transactions for processing and say, I want you to do this asynchronously, and maybe let me know when it's done. Maybe I don't even care. I just want you to go off and do this thing, and leave me alone after that. That mode of operation, we're starting to see it actually much more often these days. I know we've got one big project where we're implementing exactly that for one of our customers at Smile. The HAPI FHIR client, as I say, doesn't have any great tooling there. I would love for us to add that. I don't know that it's on the roadmap currently, but it probably should. It should probably. Oh my goodness, it probably should. So thank you for that, Jens. I think that's actually a really great suggestion. Noted.
Yeah. I'm loving the Q&As today. Great ideas and stuff like that as well. We've got a small one. It's a little bit specific, so I might just make it a bit more general. That's asking about Smile's P2P solution and just its ability to integrate with other P2P solutions outside of Smile. They're specifically giving the example of Onyx P2P, but probably just in general would be useful as well.
All right. Well, so if you have been following the world of the payer-to-payer data transfer, the P2P world, it's a bit of a messy world, and of course it really is. It's a nice little use case in the world of standards development. When you're building standards for anything, and when you're building implementation guides for anything, I mean, a big part of this is you're often solving problems that just have not been solved electronically before, or at least don't have good electronic solutions. And a lot of that does mean trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't. And sometimes things don't work out, which is always unfortunate when that happens. But that's the name of the game. I mean, we are collectively, all of us here at Smile, and all of us, I'm sure, who are watching this webinar, we are all trying to move the industry forward, and that's a messy process. Sometimes things don't work out. One of the things that has not gone exactly as planned, and I don't mean this for us, I mean this for the entire community at large, is the world of, and I hope I get these right because I always mix these names up, the world of mediated exchange. There was an IG that specified a member mediated exchange flow. We implemented a P2P solution on that. I know a number of other people did as well. Unfortunately, it just hasn't worked out. It has proven to be unworkable by sort of the community at large. We were sad because we put a lot of work into it, but there we go. The upcoming next version of it is what's called member delegated exchange, which is a different, I mean, it solves the same problem, solves it in a fairly different way. It's actually, I think, it's very clear to everyone, it's a better solution. It's harder to implement, but it is a better solution. I will say categorically, we are working on a solution there. To all of our payer customers who might happen to be watching, we are absolutely committed to your compliance needs. We are working on solutions for P2P data exchange. We're working on solutions for all of the compliance needs. We've got lots of other innovative stuff planned, but we are categorically committed to supporting you on your journey to mandate compliance as well. So we do have a product which will satisfy the member delegated exchange needs of P2P. I can't say a whole lot more about it just yet because actually that IG isn't even yet final. So there's a lot of work going on there to figure out exactly how it should work. We are actively participating, we are actively building, we are actively designing. So we will have more to say closer to the compliance dates as everything gets finalized. But there is a good bit of time between now and then. I think 2026 is the enforcement date for the next version of payer-to-payer. So more to come on that one.
I personally have to keep a sticky note on my computer to keep the member delegated and member mediated with a quick definition of both to keep them straight. But I know there's a lot of work going into that right now. We've got another quick question, just I think following up from before about future plans to support Elasticsearch 8XXX. I'm just presuming it's 8 and then the other numbers. And then also Hibernate Search for 2.6.
Right. I'm sorry. There was a previous question about Hibernate Search. I did not intentionally skip it. I just forgot. So thank you for bringing that up again. Okay, let's say this. So support for the latest Elasticsearch, there's a long chain of dependencies here. So as software developers know, this is a problem that often happens. In order to support the latest version of Elasticsearch, we need to upgrade to the latest version of Hibernate Search. In order to upgrade to the latest version of Hibernate Search, we need to upgrade to the latest version of Hibernate. In order to upgrade to the latest version of Hibernate, and I believe that's Hibernate 6, might be 5, I think it's 6. I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but I know I looked at this recently. I'm pretty sure it's 6. In order to do that, we need to upgrade to the latest version of Spring, the Spring 6 framework. In order to upgrade to the latest version of Spring, we need to migrate from the Javax servlet framework to the Jakarta servlet framework. So you see, hopefully people can see where I'm going with this. There is a giant, painful chain of dependencies that we've been pondering whether to do for a long time, just because of the breaking API nature of it all, but we have decided to proceed with it. So I guess this is good news. As of November, we are going to upgrade the servlet API, and because we make that servlet change, we are forced to upgrade Spring because the Spring made that breaking change between their 5 and 6 release. Once we upgrade Spring, we are forced to upgrade Hibernate because Hibernate made that API change in their latest release, their latest major release. And because we make that Hibernate change, we are forced to make the Hibernate search change. And as a result of that, we will also support, I believe, the latest version of Elasticsearch. I truthfully don't know that last statement is true. I believe it is, but whatever version of Elasticsearch is supported by Elasticsearch or by Hibernate Search 6, that will be the version that we support. So lots of upgrades coming in November. I guess that's the short version of the answer to that question.
If that was the short version, like it's just a long chain. I don't know how you keep it all straight in your head. Thank you so much. That's most of the questions from the chat so far. I just want to sneak in one of my own, and it follows up to my original question and then some of the other stuff we've been talking about today. There's so many IGs out there. Prior auth has at least 3. P2P has at least, like, I don't even want to think about how many P2P has. How do you choose which like IGs that we're supporting or focusing on for a given like release for a product or for Smile CDR?
Oh, this is fun. All right, cool. I guess we'll lump these into let's say 3 categories. I am absolutely winging this. We did not plan this question, but I'm going to say we got 3 categories of IGs that we're interested in. Category 1 is the compliance IGs, and this is basically Da Vinci and things that are required for GTAN and all of that. I mean, one of our core businesses is helping people be compliant with mandates. So if there's a mandated IG out there that our customers, we have customers today, or we are interested in customers in the future, we will absolutely implement those IGs. That much we are committed to being on the compliance journey with any of our customers. So naturally, we do very much prioritize the compliance IGs. So that would be category 1. Category 2, I would say there's just plain a bunch of IGs where there's little to no work for us to support. I mean, many IGs are mostly about data models and search parameters and usage patterns and things like that. They're not mandating new custom operation definitions or anything like that. Those cases, I mean, we do make a very concerted effort to test IGs like that, make sure that we can actually import them, ingest them, do validations against them and stuff like that. And those ones, I mean, because they're so low effort, we do try and do them. We often miss, and we've been talking internally a fair bit lately about how we do a better job of that. We've got some structural changes actually planned that I think will help us to do a better job of doing those types of IGs. So that's number 2. And the third category, which is, I think, to me personally, the most fun, is we are also interested in uncovering the IGs that are going to drive the industry forward. We are very much interested in finding IGs that perhaps haven't received enough attention yet, or maybe have, but we think deserve even more attention. We try and get involved in those IGs. We try and implement reference implementations. We try and roll production-ready versions of implementations into our products, so that we can help drive the industry forward with those great IGs. 2 really good examples of that third category would be the International Patient Summary and the IHE BALP IG. Both of those, I think, are transformative, very different for very different reasons, respectively. But I think they're both industry transformative things, and we have endeavored to come up with production-grade solutions to both of those IGs. We always welcome suggestions. This is kind of a nice, perhaps, tail end to this question. If you know of an IG that you think we're not paying attention to, that you think we should be paying attention to, we would love to hear from you, because, of course, no one person, no one company, frankly, can keep up with the blistering pace of IG development these days. And I think that's only going to get, I don't want to say worse, because it's not a bad thing, but I think as the rest of the world, as the entire world, shall we say, starts to develop IGs and gets involved in FHIR implementation, like more and more people are doing this. So we'd love to hear from people who are developing their own profiles and things like that.
Okay, thank you so much. It looks like we'll eventually be spoiled for choice and need some help choosing, but I've been wondering that for a while. I'm sorry I threw it at you right at the end, but that was a great answer, and I think I learned a lot. I want to that's all of our questions, both mine and the chats. We timed that out quite well. So I just want to thank you so much. I'm looking forward to learning more about quite a few things you mentioned in November. But thank you for your time. I want to thank all the developers for their hard work and everyone for attending and their questions. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you all. We'll see you in November.